The moment my husband found out he was getting an inheritance, he just announced, "Pack your bags, I'm rich now." Then he kicked me out the door and filed for divorce. I signed everything without a fuss, but the second the lawyer finished reading the will, he fell to his knees in front of me. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Tanisha woke up to the sound of her alarm at 5:30 in the morning. It was still dark outside. Only the streetlights dimly lit the snow-dusted yard. She stretched, careful not to wake Darius, and cautiously slipped out from under the covers. The cold instantly shocked her bare feet. The radiator in their old two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town barely put out any heat. In the bathroom, Tanisha looked at her reflection. 32 years old, but she looked closer to 40. The dark circles under her eyes, which no amount of makeup could hide anymore, the first fine lines around her mouth, and hair that was long overdue for a color touch-up. She hadn't had the time or the money. She ran a hand over her face, splashed cold water on it, and started getting ready for work. "Up early again," Darius grumbled sleepily from the bedroom. "I have to be there by 8, babe," Tanisha replied softly, pulling on a worn-out sweatshirt. "Just sleep a little longer." "How am I supposed to sleep when you're clanking around this early?" he muttered, rolling over to face the wall. Tanisha bit her lip. 5 years ago, when they first moved in together, Darius always woke up with her. He'd kiss her goodbye before she left for work, tell her she was the best, make her coffee while she got ready, kiss the top of her head, and promise to cook dinner that evening. Now every single move she made seemed to annoy him. In the kitchen, she quickly brewed a cup of coffee and ate a cheese sandwich standing by the window. There was never time for a real breakfast. By 7, she was already out the door to catch the bus to the clinic where she worked as an administrative assistant. The job was monotonous and dull, taking calls, scheduling appointments, handling patient complaints, and grievances. The salary was small, about $2,800 a month, but it was steady, and that money was the main income for their household. Darius's work was hard to define. For the past 3 years, he'd been trying to start his own business. 1 minute an online sports nutrition store, the next a consulting agency, then a computer repair service. Nothing ever stuck. The money they saved for a vacation, a new refrigerator, or a house repair all disappeared into his latest project, and there were never any returns. The most he ever made was $500 to $700 in a month, and that wasn't even consistent. "I'm building our future," he'd say every time Tanisha timidly suggested he should get a regular job, even temporarily. "You just don't understand how business works. You have to invest. You have to be patient. Look at successful people. They all took risks." And Tanisha endured. She took on a second job in the evenings. After the clinic, she did remote bookkeeping for small firms, sitting at the computer until midnight, reviewing accounts and invoices, balancing books just to make ends meet, pay for rent, utilities, and internet, buy groceries, and ensure Darius had seed money for his next genius idea. That second job brought in another $1,500 to $2,000, depending on the number of clients, or more if she was lucky. The bus arrived late, and Tanisha barely made it in time for the start of her shift. The entire day flew by in a blur of endless calls, frustrated patients, and demanding doctors. By lunchtime, her head was pounding, but going home was still hours away. After work, she needed to hit the supermarket for dinner supplies, then rush home to her computer. She had an urgent project, a report due by tomorrow evening. She finally got back to the apartment around 9 o'clock. Her arms ached from the heavy bags of groceries. Her feet throbbed from standing all day. Darius was sitting on the sofa with his laptop, absorbed in scrolling through something. In the kitchen sink, dirty dishes from lunch were piled up. Crumbs, an empty teacup, and an opened package of cookies littered the table. Tanisha silently took off her coat, went into the kitchen, and started washing the dishes. "Hey, Tani, you should take a break first," Darius tossed out without looking away from the screen. "You're always rushing around." "If I don't wash them, who will?" she replied tiredly, lathering a plate. "Come on, they're just cups. You can do them later. The world won't fall apart in one night." Tanisha didn't answer. It was pointless. They used to cook dinner and clean up together and plan their weekends. He would happily spend all Saturday helping her organize the closet or paint a room. Now, she felt like a maid in her own home. She washed the dishes, wiped the table, put the groceries in the fridge, then heated up the leftovers of last night's soup and sat down to eat. Darius came into the kitchen, poured himself some tea from the kettle she'd brewed that morning, grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, and returned to the sofa. "Darius, how about we go somewhere this Sunday?" Tanisha suggested cautiously, finishing her soup. "Even just a walk in the park. We haven't gone out together in 3 months." "Tani, my head is focused on business," he dismissed, not lifting his eyes from the screen. "I don't have time for walks right now." "But just for a couple of hours. Do you realize this is a crucial time for me? I'm on the verge of a big breakthrough. Marvin found an investor who's ready to back our project. I need to prepare a presentation and a business plan, and you want to go for a walk." Tanisha fell silent. A big breakthrough. She'd heard those words hundreds of times over the past 3 years. The breakthrough never came. Just another investor, another project, another set of empty promises. She finished her soup, washed her bowl, and went to the computer. She needed to finish reports for 2 clients by tomorrow morning. She sat down at the desk in the corner of their tiny bedroom, turned on the lamp, and dove into the numbers. The TV was on in the living room. Darius was watching football, occasionally yelling out comments about the game. This was how her days passed. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Work, home, work, home. She had forgotten the last time she bought something new for herself. Her jeans were worn through at the knees. Her boots needed a cobbler, the sole was peeling off, and her feet got soaked in the slush. And she couldn't afford a new winter coat. Darius had asked for $1,000 last month for equipment for his latest venture, and she couldn't refuse. Tanisha also noticed how Darius had changed. He started looking at her with a kind of contempt, as if she were a burden, an obstacle, something holding him back from success. "You know, you should really join a gym or something," he said one evening as she was changing for bed. "You've really let yourself go. Take a look at yourself." Tanisha froze, a t-shirt in her hands. She stood there in an old bra and her home sweatpants, staring at him, unable to believe her ears. "Darius, I'm just tired," she said softly. "I don't have time for a gym. I work from 8 in the morning until midnight." "Those are just excuses," he waved off, scrolling through his phone feed. "Everyone finds the time if they want to. Look at Stacy, Marvin's wife. She takes care of herself. She goes to fitness classes and gets her nails done. She's always polished and beautiful. And you? Well, you know." He didn't finish the sentence, but Tanisha understood perfectly. She lay down in bed, facing the wall, clenching her fists under the covers. Tears welled up in her throat, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry. She was just exhausted, that was all. Tomorrow was a new day, new work, new worries, and tears wouldn't change anything. A week later, a similar scene unfolded. They were in the kitchen. Tanisha was cooking dinner, frying patties, and boiling potatoes. Darius was looking at some website on his tablet. "You know, Tanny, normal wives create the right environment for their husbands to work," he said suddenly. "Like Sterling's wife. She doesn't work at all. She stays home, cooks, cleans, and he can focus on his business without distraction." "Sterling has his own company that makes money," Tanisha replied wearily, flipping the patties. "What would we live on if I stopped working?" "Well, that's why nothing ever works out for me," Darius exploded. "Because I have to think about the housework, about you being tired from work, about you feeling bad. I can't concentrate. Look, if you were making decent money, I could focus on development. But instead, it's always this lack of money, this scrimping on everything. How can I think big when I have to count every penny?" Tanisha turned off the stove. The patties were done. She silently transferred them to a plate and set it on the table. Darius took one and bit into it. "Too much salt," he grumbled. She tasted it. The salt was fine. He was just picking a fight because he was angry, because he blamed her for his failures, because it was easier that way. The winter passed and spring arrived. Tanisha continued to work 2 jobs, continued to carry everything on her own. Darius grew colder and more distant. Sometimes he didn't come home at all, claiming he was staying at his friend Marvin's place to discuss business plans late into the night, so it was easier to crash there. Tanisha didn't ask. She was afraid of hearing the truth, afraid to find out he might be seeing someone else, that he was only with her out of habit, for the convenience of a free apartment, a hot dinner, and clean laundry. Then something happened that turned everything upside down. It was a normal weekday evening in May. Tanisha got home from work, put a pot of rice on the stove, and started slicing vegetables for a salad. Darius was in his usual spot on the sofa, but this time he wasn't looking at his laptop. He was talking on the phone. He spoke quietly, but there was a strange excitement in his voice. "Yeah, I got it," he mumbled. "Yes, I'll be there tomorrow for sure." "What time?" 11 o'clock. "Okay, I'll be there. Thanks for letting me know." He hung up and sat motionless for a few seconds, staring into space. Then he suddenly leaped up and paced the room, rubbing his hands together. "What happened?" Tanisha asked, peering from the kitchen with a knife in her hand. Darius turned around. A strange smile played on his face, not sad, not mournful, but greedy. "Grandpa Sterling passed away," he said. Tanisha gasped, the knife almost slipping from her hand. Darius's grandfather, Mr. Sterling Miller, was very old, nearing 90 if she remembered correctly. They had only seen him a couple of times during their 5 years together. The old man lived in another state, about 3 hours' drive away, and barely kept in touch with relatives. Still, death was death. "Oh, Darius, I'm so sorry," she began, wiping her hands on a towel and walking closer. "How did it happen? Was he sick?" "Sorry." Darius chuckled oddly, and there wasn't a drop of sorrow in the sound. "Yeah, sure. Sorry. He was 88, but that's not the point. The lawyer called. Turns out Grandpa left a will. And I'm named in it." Tanisha blinked, not immediately grasping what he was hinting at. "A will?" "Yes." Darius clenched his fists, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. "He left an inheritance. That means there's money. There was definitely an apartment, I remember, a 3-bedroom in the downtown area. Maybe something else? A country house? Money in accounts? I'm going to the lawyer tomorrow to find out everything." He strode around the room, rubbing his hands like a merchant who had just clinched a good deal. "Finally. I finally got lucky. This is fate, Tani, a sign from above. I told you everything would work out. We just had to wait." Tanisha stood watching him. Something inside her tightened and stung painfully. That was his reaction to his grandfather's death. Not grief or sadness, but joy at the possible inheritance. His own grandfather had just died, and he was celebrating the money. "Maybe we should organize the funeral first," she suggested cautiously. "Give him a proper send-off." "Aunt Gloria will handle that," Darius dismissed. "She lives near him, in his town. She was in touch with him their whole lives. Let her handle it. I need to deal with the inheritance. The lawyer said the will reading is the day after tomorrow. I have to be there by 11 a.m. He was wired the whole evening. He couldn't sit still, pacing back and forth, calling friends, sharing the news. He told everyone the same thing. Grandpa died, left an inheritance. He was going to be rich soon. The rice on the stove boiled over, the water evaporated, and the grain began to burn. Tanisha turned off the burner, dumped the contents of the pot, and simply went to the bedroom. She had lost her appetite. There was a lump in her throat and a heavy, hollow feeling in her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to Darius excitedly discussing something on the phone with another friend in the next room, and thought about how much everything had changed. When she fell in love with him 5 years ago, he was different, kind, attentive, caring. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and he had seemed so genuine, so open. They dated for a year, and it was the happiest year of her life. He brought her flowers just because, took her to the movies, made her breakfast. They dreamed together about a family, children, a home they would build. Then they moved in together, and it was as if something broke. Slowly at first, in small ways, then more and more. He became colder, she became quieter. He became more demanding, she became more submissive. And now, 5 years later, she lay in the darkness and realized she didn't even know who this man next to her was. The next 2 days, Darius was completely on edge. He was constantly figuring things out on a calculator, Googling property values in his grandfather's city, looking at apartment listings, trying to estimate how much a 3-bedroom downtown unit might be worth. He built his plans out loud. I'll finally buy a real car, not this beat-up junker. I'll open a real office in a decent neighborhood. We'll go to the beach. No, better yet, Europe. I've always wanted to see Paris. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Darius. Tanisha tried to rein him in over dinner. You don't know exactly what's in the will yet. I know what's in it, he interrupted confidently, waving his fork. I'm the only grandchild. Grandpa doesn't have any other direct heirs. Aunt Gloria is his late wife's sister, so no blood relation at all. Everything goes to me. It's logical. He sipped his tea and looked at her with an appraising gaze, the way you look at an object you're deciding whether to keep or throw away. You know, Tani, maybe you really should think about your appearance, he said suddenly. When I have money, I'll need a wife who matches my status. Look at you. You dress like you shop at a thrift store. Your hair's not colored, no manicure. I'd be embarrassed to take you anywhere nice. Tanisha felt the blood rush to her cheeks. Her hands started trembling. She set her cup on the table, afraid she would drop it. I dress this way because we don't have money, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I give all my money to our shared expenses and your projects. Oh, here we go again, Darius winced. Always with the guilt trips. It's not my fault you don't know how to budget. Normal women somehow manage to spend money on themselves and maintain a home. Tanisha opened her mouth to object, but the words caught in her throat. Darius had already gotten up from the table and walked out of the kitchen without even cleaning up his dishes. She was left sitting alone, staring at the half-finished tea and the dinner leftovers, feeling something definitively and irrevocably break inside her. She walked to the hall mirror and looked at herself for a long time. Indeed, she didn't look great. An old pilled sweatshirt, faded jeans she'd been wearing for 3 years, messy hair with grown-out roots, a tired face with deep shadows under her eyes. But was it her fault? She worked 2 jobs so he could build a business. She denied herself everything just to have enough money to live on, buying the cheapest things, cutting corners on every little detail. And this was his gratitude. He said he was ashamed of her, that she didn't meet his status. Tanisha slowly went back to the kitchen and sat at the table. Her hands were still shaking. She poured herself a glass of water from the pitcher and took a few sips, trying to calm down. She needed to get a grip. Maybe it was just his emotions before getting the inheritance. Maybe when everything settled down, when this euphoria passed, Darius would go back to being himself. Maybe everything could still be fixed, but deep down, in the most secret corner of her soul, she already knew the truth. Nothing would go back to the way it was. The Darius she loved 5 years ago was gone, and maybe he never existed at all. The morning started with Darius pacing the apartment like a caged animal. He woke up earlier than Tanisha, which was an event in itself. He usually slept until 10, sometimes noon, but today, by 7:30, he was standing in front of the hall mirror, carefully applying gel to his hair and meticulously examining his shirt. "Does this look okay?" he asked when Tanisha came out of the bedroom. "Should I wear a tie?" "No, that's stupid. It's not a job interview, but it is an important meeting. Maybe a tie after all?" Tanisha looked at him. He was wearing his best white shirt, the one they bought 2 years ago for some holiday. The black pants were decent, too. His shoes were shined to a gleam. "It's fine," she said softly. "You look good." "Of course I look good," he mumbled, turning first one side, then the other in front of the mirror. "Today is a big day. Today I find out how much I got." He didn't eat breakfast, just chugged his coffee, burning his mouth. He was nervous, though he tried not to show it. He kept glancing at the clock, checking his phone, then checking the clock again. "What time do you need to leave?" Tanisha asked, pouring herself some tea. 11 o'clock, but I'll leave early just to be sure. 10, maybe 9:30, in case of traffic. Do you want me to come with you? She offered cautiously. For moral support? Darius abruptly turned around and looked at her as if she had suggested something totally inappropriate. Why? He snapped. This is Miller family business. You have nothing to do with it. Tanisha sipped her tea, feeling the hot liquid burn her throat. Family business. So she wasn't family, even though they had lived together for 5 years. Fine, was all she said. Good. It's going to be stressful enough as it is. Aunt Gloria will be there with all her whining. She always knows how to ruin a mood. He checked himself in the mirror one last time, smoothed his shirt, and grabbed his jacket from the hanger. I'm heading out. I'll be back when I get back. I might need to discuss everything with the lawyer later tonight. Look at the documents. And he left without even saying goodbye. The door slammed, and Tanisha was left alone in the empty apartment. She finished her cold tea, washed her cup, and got ready for work. It promised to be a long day. At the clinic, time dragged painfully slow. Tanisha mechanically answered calls and scheduled patients, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about what was happening at the lawyer's office, what would happen next, and how their life would change if Darius really received a large inheritance. Would he go back to being the kind, attentive person she once knew? Or would he completely turn into the arrogant man she had seen these last few months? During her lunch break, she tried to call him, but he didn't answer. She texted, "How's it going?" Read receipt, but no reply. She returned home around 7 in the evening. Darius wasn't there. The apartment greeted her with silence and emptiness. Tanisha heated up yesterday's soup, ate, washed the dishes, and then sat down at the computer. The work hadn't gone anywhere. She needed to finish the report, but she couldn't focus. She kept listening for sounds in the hallway, waiting for the door to open. Darius didn't return until 9:30. Tanisha heard the lock click and him walk into the entryway. She got up from the computer and went out to meet him. "Well?" she asked, trying to read anything in his face. Darius stood in the doorway, a strange smile on his face. Not joyful, not happy, but predatory. "Everything's great," he said, pulling off his jacket. "Even better than I thought." "And? What was it?" Tanisha stepped closer. "The condo." Darius walked into the living room and flopped onto the sofa, leaning back. A 3-bedroom, 1,200 square feet right downtown, a country house in the suburbs, a bank account, and stocks in some old company that Grandpa bought God knows when. The lawyer said it's easily worth $5 million total, maybe more. We need to call an appraiser and get everything counted up. Tanisha sat on the edge of the armchair. $5 million. That was an enormous amount of money, more than she had ever dreamed of. "My God," she breathed out. "It's a fortune," Darius finished for her. "I'm rich now, Tani. Finally. That's it. No more living in this dump. No more counting pennies. I'm buying a decent condo, a new car. I'm starting the business I always needed money for. Everything's going to change." He kept saying I, not we. Tanisha noticed but said nothing. "When can you finalize everything?" she asked. "The lawyer said in a week or 2. I need to collect some papers, appraise the property, but those are just formalities. The main thing is, the money is mine." He got up from the sofa and went to the window. He stood looking out at the evening city, at the lights of the houses. Then he turned and looked at Tanisha with a long, assessing gaze. "You know, Tani, I have a lot to think about tonight," he said suddenly, his voice strangely cold. "So I'm going over to Marvin's now. We'll sit and hash things out. I'll be back late. Don't wait up." "But Darius—" "That's it. I'm going." And he left, slamming the door again. Tanisha remained seated in the armchair, staring at the empty spot where her husband had just stood. A cold, clammy feeling of dread began to grow inside her. For the next 2 days, Darius was barely home. He came back late at night when Tanisha was already asleep and left early in the morning. They barely spoke. He was engrossed in his thoughts and his plans, and there seemed to be no room for her in them. Then, what she least expected happened. It was Sunday, around noon. Tanisha was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, reading the news on her phone. Darius was home, but he had locked himself in the bedroom since the morning, working on his computer. Suddenly he came out and his face was resolute. "Tani, we need to talk," he said, and the tone of his voice made Tanisha's blood run cold. "About what?" she asked, slowly setting down her phone. Darius walked into the kitchen, got a glass from the cupboard, poured himself some water, and drank it in one gulp. Then he turned to her and said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days, and I realized one thing. You and we're stuck, you know? We've been treading water for years, and I don't want to live like that anymore." "What are you talking about?" Tanisha stood up from the table, feeling her heart pound faster and faster. "I'm saying I need to move on, start a new life. And you, Tani, you're an anchor. You're dragging me down." "Darius, what are you saying?" Her voice trembled. "I'm saying we need to break up. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, and Tanisha couldn't believe she had heard them. Divorce. He wanted a divorce, now that he had money. Are you serious?" she managed to choke out. "Completely," Darius replied coldly. "I've thought it all through. It's the best decision for both of us. You'll find someone who's right for you, and I'll start a new life." "We've been together for 5 years," Tanisha whispered, feeling her legs give way. 5 years, Darius. I supported you this whole time. I worked 2 jobs so you could pursue your projects. And I appreciate that," he interrupted with an indifferent tone. "I really do. But gratitude isn't love, and there hasn't been love between us for a long time, let's be honest." "How can you say that?" "I'm telling the truth. We got used to each other, but that doesn't mean we have to be together for life. People change. I've changed, and I need something different." Tanisha sank back into the chair. Her legs couldn't support her. Her head was foggy, and there was a pain in her chest that felt like her heart was about to tear open. "You waited until you got the money," she said quietly, looking at the floor. "That's why you didn't say anything sooner. You waited." Darius remained silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "I packed your things," he said finally. "They're in the entryway. A suitcase and 2 bags. Everything is there. Your clothes, makeup, books. You can pick up the rest later if you want." Tanisha raised her head and looked at him. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest, looking down at her. And there was no regret or guilt in his gaze, only cold, calm indifference. "Are you kicking me out?" she asked, her voice sounding foreign and broken. "Right now?" "The sooner the better," he replied. "No need to drag out the goodbye. It only makes it harder." She stood up on shaky legs and slowly walked to the entryway. Sure enough, her suitcase and 2 bags were standing there. He had actually packed her belongings. While she was at work yesterday, he was methodically folding her clothes, her personal items, getting ready to throw her out the door. "I prepared the divorce papers," Darius said, walking into the entryway behind her. He picked up some papers from a small table and handed them to her. "It's all straightforward. No asset claims, mutual consent. You just need to sign. I'll file with the courthouse myself. Everything will be finalized in a month." Tanisha took the papers with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the lines, but she couldn't concentrate. She couldn't read. The letters blurred. "I don't need you anymore," Darius said, and there was a note of mockery in his voice. "I'm rich now, you understand? I'm going to have a new life, a beautiful, successful life. And you'll stay in your gray, miserable existence. That's what suits you." He smirked, looking at her pale face. "Did you really think I'd stick with you? Did you really think I'd want to drag you up with me? Look at yourself. You're a gray mouse, Tani. You're a nobody, and you'll never be the woman a successful man needs." Every word was like a punch. Tanisha stood and listened as the man she loved, the man she gave 5 years of her life to, trampled her, humiliated her, destroyed her. "And as for your sacrifices," Darius continued, making air quotes with his fingers, "that was your choice. Nobody forced you to work 2 jobs. You decided to do that, and now don't try to guilt me." Tanisha looked at him with a long, steady gaze, and suddenly something snapped inside her. The pain hadn't gone away, but something else overlaid it. something cold and hard, dignity. "Where do I sign?" she asked in a level voice. Darius was taken aback for a moment. He had probably expected tears, pleas, hysterics. But Tanisha stood calmly, her back straight, looking at him with a settled gaze. "Right here," he pointed, jabbing his finger at a line near the bottom of the page, "and here, on the second page." Tanisha took the pen he offered and with a steady hand wrote her signature. Once, twice. That was it. 5 years of her life wiped out with 2 strokes of a pen. "Well, that's great," Darius said, taking the documents. "Perfect. Quick and no drama. I always knew you were a smart woman." He folded the papers, put them in a folder, then turned to the door and flung it open. "Well, I wish you well," he tossed out with a smirk. "Or, as they say, good luck finding the next sucker to take care of you." Tanisha silently picked up the suitcase and one bag. They were heavy, but she didn't even flinch. She stepped across the threshold, then went back for the second bag. Darius stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching her with that repulsive, smug smile. "You know what, Tani?" he said as she picked up the second bag. "I almost pity you a little. You're not a bad woman generally, just not my level, you know? I'm playing in a different league now." Tanisha stopped on the doorstep, turned her head and looked at him. She looked one last time at the man she had once loved and realized there was nothing left. No love, not even hatred, just emptiness. "Goodbye, Darius," she said quietly and firmly, and walked out without looking back. The door slammed behind her, and she heard his laughter, a disgusting, malicious laugh. He was laughing at her, reveling in his victory. Tanisha walked down the stairs, carrying the heavy bags, and stepped onto the street. It was a bright spring day. The sun was shining, birds were singing. Life went on, despite everything. And she stood in the middle of that life with 2 bags and a suitcase, homeless, husbandless, with a broken heart, but her head held high. She took out her phone and dialed her friend Keisha's number. "Keisha, it's me," she said when the phone was answered. "Can I come stay with you? I need a place to sleep just for a few days. I left Darius." Her voice finally broke on the last few words, but she pulled herself together. Now was not the time to fall apart. The tears and the pain could come later. Right now, she just needed to get to Keisha's, to a safe place where she could rest and figure out what to do next. "Of course, come right over," Keisha's worried voice sounded through the phone. "What happened? Tell me when you get here. I'll be waiting." Tanisha took a taxi, settling into the back seat, placing her bags beside her and the suitcase in the trunk. As the car started moving and the familiar streets began to glide past the window, she allowed herself to close her eyes. And only then, in the darkness behind her closed eyelids, did the first tears begin to fall. Keisha met her at the door of her 1-bedroom apartment with hot tea and a warm hug. She didn't ask any unnecessary questions. She just helped Tanisha carry her things, sat her down on the sofa, and pressed the mug into her hands. "Drink this, then tell me everything," she said, sitting down beside her. Tanisha told her everything, about the inheritance, the last few months, and how Darius had kicked her out that day, laughing as she left. She spoke softly, without crying, because the tears had already run out in the taxi. All that was left was a drained emptiness inside. What a jerk, Tani," Keisha hissed when Tanisha finished. "I always felt there was something off about him, but you loved him, so I kept quiet." "I did love him," Tanisha replied quietly, "but apparently that wasn't enough." For the first few days, she just existed. She slept on Keisha's sofa, went to work, came back, ate something, and went back to sleep, mechanically, without thought. Keisha tried to talk to her, to distract her, but Tanisha just shook her head and retreated into herself. Her phone was silent. Darius didn't call, didn't text, as if she had never existed in his life. Then on the 4th day, an unfamiliar number called. "Tanisha Brooks?" a man's voice asked when she answered. "Yes, this is she." "This is the law office of Ms. Harrison. My name is Ian Miller. I'm the notary's assistant. I need to meet with you urgently regarding the estate of Mr. Sterling Miller." Tanisha was confused. "But I'm not a relative," she said. "He was my ex-husband's grandfather. We're already divorced. Well, processing the divorce." "That is precisely why I need to meet with you immediately." There was insistence in the man's voice. "This is very important. Can you come in today, say, at 3 o'clock? Tanisha looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. She was just about to leave for work. "I can come in at 6 p.m. after work," she said. "Excellent. We'll expect you at 6. Do you know the address? Elm Street, number 12, 3rd floor, office 305. "Okay, I'll be there." Tanisha thought about the call all day. Why did she need to go to the lawyer? What could possibly connect her to Darius's grandfather's inheritance? She barely knew the old man. She had only met him twice. At 6:15, she stood outside the office door. She paused, took a deep breath, and walked in. A middle-aged woman in a strict suit sat at a desk in the reception area. "Good evening. I'm Tanisha Brooks. I was asked to come in." "Please go in. They're waiting for you." The woman nodded toward the office door. Tanisha entered. A man about 50 with graying hair and an attentive gaze sat at a large desk. In a chair by the window sat an older woman in a black dress. Tanisha recognized her. It was Aunt Gloria, the late wife's sister Darius had mentioned, and standing next to the wall was Darius himself. He looked pale. His eyes darted nervously between the lawyer and Tanisha. When she walked in, he flinched as if he wanted to say something, but stayed silent. "Tanisha Brooks, please have a seat," the lawyer said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. She sat down, placing her bag on her lap. Her heart was hammering in her throat. "My name is Mr. Solis. I am handling the estate of Mr. Sterling Miller," the lawyer began. "I needed to find you urgently because a delicate situation has arisen." He opened a folder on the table and took out several sheets of paper. "The deceased's will contained a condition that I only informed the heir about in general terms at the first meeting, but now it must be read in full in the presence of all interested parties." Darius clenched his fists. Tanisha saw it in her peripheral vision, but kept her eyes fixed on the lawyer. "I will read you the full text of the inheritance clause," Mr. Solis continued, putting on his glasses. I quote, "All of my assets, including the condominium at the address 8 Central Street, Unit 23, the country property in Pine Grove, the funds and accounts at Bank of America, as well as the shares in OPCO Construction, I bequeath to my grandson, Darius Johnson. However, he may only receive this inheritance upon the fulfillment of the following condition. At the time of inheriting, Darius Johnson must be in an official marriage with his current wife, Tanisha Brooks, continuously for at least 1 year from the date of my death." The lawyer paused and looked over his glasses at Darius. "Furthermore, in the event that the marriage is dissolved before the specified term, or if Darius Johnson is not married to Tanisha Brooks at the time of my death, all the aforementioned assets shall transfer in full to Tanisha Brooks, as the person who demonstrated true nobility and dignity." Silence descended upon the office. Tanisha didn't immediately comprehend what she had heard. The words reached her slowly, as if through cotton. The inheritance would pass to her, if the marriage was dissolved and they had already signed the divorce papers. This is impossible," Darius stammered, stepping toward the desk. "This can't be. Grandpa couldn't have written that." "The will was drafted 2 years ago," the lawyer replied calmly. "Properly notarized and signed in the presence of witnesses. It is perfectly legal." "But why?" Darius clutched his head. "Why would he do that? I'm his grandson, his only grandson." Aunt Gloria slowly rose from her chair and looked at Darius with sadness. "Because Mr. Miller saw right through you," she said quietly but firmly. 2 years ago, when he last came to your city, he stayed with you for a couple of days, remember?" Darius was silent, his face white. "He saw how you treated Tani," the old woman continued, "how you walked all over her, how you took advantage of her working 2 jobs. He saw that she was a good person and that you were selfish and rude, and that's when he decided to change the will." "He came to my office," the lawyer confirmed. "He said he wanted to protect a deserving person. He stated that if you remained married for at least 1 year after his death, It would mean you were truly meant to be together, and the inheritance would be yours. But if you divorced, then Tanisha Brooks deserved compensation for all the years she endured your relationship. Darius collapsed into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "When did you file for divorce?" the lawyer asked, flipping through papers. "I filed the papers 2 days ago," Darius replied dully. "I paid for the expedited procedure to finalize it quickly." "And the divorce is already registered," the lawyer nodded. "Yesterday at 3 p.m. Here is the seal in the court database. Therefore, the condition of the will has been violated. The marriage was dissolved less than 1 year after the testator's death. Consequently, according to the will, all assets transfer to Tanisha Brooks." Tanisha sat motionless, her head spinning. It was unreal. $5 million. The condo, the country house. It was all hers now, not Darius's, the man who had thrown her out of their home with a laugh. Hers. "No," Darius choked out, jumping to his feet. "No, it's mine. It's my inheritance. I'm the grandson. I have the right." "You had the right," the lawyer corrected, "until you divorced your wife. Now the right has transferred to her. This is the will of the deceased, and it is being executed in accordance with the law." Darius spun around to Tanisha. His eyes burned with a feverish intensity. "Tani," he breathed, taking a step toward her. "Tani, listen. This is all a mistake, a stupid misunderstanding. I didn't mean what I said. I was just on edge, because of the whole inheritance thing." Tanisha watched him silently. "We can fix everything," he continued, falling to his knees in front of her, right in the middle of the office. "We can get married again. The divorce was just finalized yesterday. We can cancel it, right?" He turned to the lawyer. "Can't we file some kind of motion to reverse the divorce?" "The divorce cannot be reversed," the lawyer answered dryly. "But you can enter into a new marriage. However, it will no longer be the marriage referred to in the will. The condition of continuous marital relations has been violated." "Then we'll get married again." Darius grabbed Tanisha's hands. His palms were sweaty and clammy. "Hear me, Tani, we'll get married. Everything will be like it was, even better. I'll change, I swear, I'll be different. I'll love you, I'll take care of you." Tanisha silently pulled her hands free. "Tani, please." His voice trembled. "Don't do this. Don't ruin my life. Grandpa wanted us to be together, don't you see? He wanted to test us, and we passed the test. We just didn't know about it." "You didn't pass the test," Tanisha said quietly, looking him in the eyes. "You kicked me out of the house. You laughed at me. You called me a gray mouse who wasn't worthy of you." "I didn't mean it," he exclaimed. "I was a fool. Forgive me. I'm on my knees asking you to forgive me." Tanisha stood up. Darius remained on his knees, looking up at her. There was panic and desperation in his eyes, but no remorse. No shame for what he had done, only the fear of losing the money. "Stand up, Darius," she said calmly. "Don't humiliate yourself." "I'll do anything." He clung to the hem of her jacket. "Anything you say. We'll get married, and I'll give you half the inheritance. No, more than half. You can have 60%, 70. Tani, please." She gently removed his hands and took a step back. "I don't want to marry you," she said quietly but firmly. "Not for any money in the world. No, Darius. You killed everything that was between us. You killed it with your words, with your laugh when you threw me out of our home, and I don't want to go back to that life. Not ever." She turned to the lawyer. "What do I need to do to finalize the inheritance?" Mr. Solis nodded respectfully. "You'll need to come in a few times, sign documents, and finalize the certificate of right to inheritance. I will explain everything. We can start right now if you wish." "I wish to," Tanisha said. "Tani, stop!" Darius scrambled to his feet. "You can't just take everything. It's mine, my inheritance. I'll sue. I'll find a way to challenge the will." "You are welcome to try," the lawyer said, "but the will is skillfully drafted. All formalities have been observed. The deceased was of sound mind and memory, as confirmed by a medical opinion. The court will not rule in your favor." "I won't let this go!" Darius shouted. I will fight for justice." "Justice has already been served," Aunt Gloria said quietly, walking over to Tanisha. She took her hand and squeezed it. "Sterling was a wise man. He knew what he was doing." She had tears in her eyes. "My dear, I'm glad it turned out this way. You're a good person, and you deserve this inheritance more than anyone." Tanisha's eyes welled up with tears. For the first time in days, they weren't tears of pain, but of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Darius stood in the middle of the office, pale, his eyes glazed over. Everything had collapsed in a single second. $5 million, a new life, all his plans, all turned to dust. And he was the only one to blame. "You may go now, Darius Johnson," the lawyer said. "Your presence is no longer required. Tanisha Brooks will stay. We need to discuss the details." Darius opened his mouth, but no words came out. He stood for a few more seconds, then turned and walked out of the office. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Tanisha exhaled. Only now did she realize she hadn't been breathing the whole time. Her legs felt weak, and she sank back into the chair. "Are you all right?" the lawyer asked worriedly. "Would you like some water?" "No, thank you. It's just so unexpected." "I understand, but believe me, Mr. Miller made the right choice. He spoke highly of you when he drafted the will. He said you were the only person in his grandson's life who deserved respect." Tanisha nodded, unsure how to reply. Aunt Gloria sat next to her and put an arm around her shoulders. "Hold on, dear," she whispered. "The worst is over. A new life is about to begin." Yes, Tanisha thought. A new life without Darius, without humiliation, without having to count every penny. With $5 million she couldn't even have imagined. It felt like a dream, both terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Tanisha left the law office as dusk was settling. She held a folder of documents in her hands. Her head was hazy, and in her chest was a strange, weightless feeling, as if she were floating above the ground. Everything that had happened felt unreal, as if someone else had received the inheritance and she was just watching from the sidelines. She took out her phone and called Keisha. "Keisha, you won't believe it," she said when her friend answered. I'm the heir. Everything went to me. $5 million. There was silence on the other end, followed by a shriek. "What? Tani, are you serious? How?" Tanisha told the story on the way to the subway about the will, the condition, and how Darius had been on his knees begging her to come back. She spoke and barely believed her own words. That's just unbelievable," Keisha gasped. "Tani, do you realize what this means? You're free, you're rich, you can do anything you want." "I haven't grasped it yet," Tanisha admitted, descending into the subway station. "It's like a dream." The next few days flew by in a whirlwind of events. Trips to the lawyer, signing papers, meetings with property appraisers, opening a bank account. Aunt Gloria helped with everything, explaining the details and offering support. It turned out she had known about Mr. Miller's plans from the start. "He told me when he wrote the will," the old woman said, sitting with Tanisha in a cafe after another visit to the lawyer. "He said, 'Gloria, I saw how that boy treats his wife. He's selfish and a jerk. If he doesn't change in a year, at least she should get compensation for all those years.' Sterling was a fair man. He couldn't stand injustice." Tanisha listened and felt gratitude for the old man she barely knew. He had protected her even after death, given her a chance to start over. Darius didn't give up. He called every day, first begging, then threatening, then begging again. He came to Keisha's building, waiting outside her apartment. Tanisha didn't talk to him. She walked past him, but he would catch up, grabbing her arm. "Tani, you can't do this to me," he yelled in the middle of the street, ignoring passers-by. "We were together for 5 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" "Did they mean anything to you?" Tanisha replied calmly, pulling her arm free. "You proved they didn't when you threw me out." "I told you I wasn't thinking straight. Forgive me. Give me another chance." But she walked past him, again and again, and with each passing time, it became easier. The pain dulled, faded, turning into indifference. One evening he appeared at Keisha's door. Tanisha opened the door to find him looking haggard, in a wrinkled shirt with swollen eyes. He held a bouquet of wilted roses. "I've been sleeping here on the stairs every night," he said hoarsely. "Waiting for you, Tani. Please, I can't live without you. Come back. We'll get married. I'll give you the whole inheritance if you want, every last penny. Just be with me." Tanisha looked at him for a long time and realized there was nothing left. No pity, no sympathy. This man was a stranger to her. "Darius, you don't get it," she said softly. "It's not about the money. It's about you showing your true colors. You humiliated me, threw me out like trash, and I never want to be with a man capable of that, never again." "But people make mistakes," he pleaded. "I made a mistake. I admit it. But we can start over." "No, we can't. Goodbye, Darius." She closed the door. She heard banging, pleas, and then sobbing behind it. Keisha looked at her friend with admiration. "Tani, you did great," she said. "I'm proud of you." Tanisha leaned against the door and closed her eyes. Yes, she had done the right thing. She knew it with all her heart. A week later, the finalization of the inheritance was complete. Tanisha became the owner of the downtown condo, the country property, the bank accounts, and the stock portfolio, which, according to the appraisers, was worth more than initially thought, about $1.2 million. The total inheritance was valued at $5.5 million. She sat in her new condo, enormous and bright, with high ceilings and windows overlooking a busy street, and couldn't believe this was her home now. The furniture was old but solid. Paintings hung on the walls and books lined the shelves. Grandpa Sterling Miller had lived a long life here, and his calm, wise aura could be felt in every corner. Tanisha stood up and walked to the window. The city roared below, people hurried somewhere, cars drove past. She stood in that apartment, and for the first time in many years, she felt free, truly free. She called the clinic and submitted her resignation. She also quit her second bookkeeping job. She no longer had to work 14 hours a day, no longer had to save money on every small thing. "What will you do now?" Keisha asked when they met at a cafe. "I don't know," Tanisha confessed, stirring her coffee. "I want to live for myself. Maybe I'll study something. I always wanted to learn French properly. And I want to travel, to see the world." "You deserve it," Keisha smiled, "after everything you've been through." Tanisha signed up for French classes, then painting classes. She loved to draw as a child, but then she never had the time. Life had gotten in the way. Now, she had time for everything. She bought clothes she liked. She went to hair and nail salons. Gradually, day by day, she was returning to herself, to the Tanisha she had buried under the weight of exhaustion and humiliation. A month later, Aunt Gloria invited her for tea. They sat in the old woman's kitchen, and Tanisha talked about her plans. "I also want to get involved in philanthropy," she said, "to help people who find themselves in a tough spot like I was, women who are left without support." "Sterling would approve," Aunt Gloria smiled, pouring tea into the mugs. "He always said that money should be used for good, not just sit there doing nothing." "Do you know that Darius tried to challenge the will?" Tanisha asked. "I heard, but just as the lawyer predicted, the court dismissed the suit. The will was drafted according to all the rules. There were no grounds for contesting it." Tanisha nodded. She felt neither gloating nor satisfaction at the news. She simply accepted it as fact. "And how is he now?" she asked, surprised by her own curiosity. "Not well," Aunt Gloria sighed. "He's lost his money, lost the apartment, the 2-bedroom you lived in. I think he was renting. Now he's living with his friend Marvin. He's trying to find a job, but no one will hire him. He has no real experience, and his ego is huge. They say he started seeing some young girl, but she left him quickly when she realized he didn't have any money." Tanisha finished her tea. She didn't feel sorry for Darius. He got what he deserved. Time passed. Tanisha traveled to Italy, her first trip overseas. She stood on a bridge in Venice and cried with happiness, with the beauty of it all, with the reality that she was here, that she was free, and that her whole life was ahead of her. She learned to paint, and it turned out she was pretty good at it. She opened a small non-profit foundation that helped women in crisis situations, paying for lawyers during divorces and helping with housing and job searches. "You've changed," Keisha said as they walked through the park on a warm autumn day. "You look younger." "I feel reborn," Tanisha admitted, "like I lived my whole life in a dungeon and have finally stepped into the light." And it was true. She blossomed. She cut and colored her hair, and she lost weight, not from dieting, but simply because she stopped eating away her stress. She started smiling, laughing, living. Then, 6 months after that memorable day at the lawyer's office, they met again. Tanisha was at a cafe, the same one where she and Keisha often sat. She ordered a cappuccino and a croissant, sat by the window, and read a book. Suddenly, the cafe door opened, and Darius walked in. He saw her immediately. He froze on the threshold. She looked up from her book and met his gaze. He looked older, haggard, thinner. He was wearing a cheap jacket, his jeans were worn out, his hair was greasy, and he had stubble on his face. Next to him was a young woman, no older than 23, a dyed blonde with vulgar makeup. She was saying something to him in an irritated tone. "Seriously? You promised to take me to a restaurant, and you brought me to this dive? Do you even have any money?" "I do, Vicky, I do," Darius mumbled, his eyes still fixed on Tanisha. "I just don't have much on me right now." "Later, later, later," the girl scoffed. "All you do is promise. If I'd known you were a broke loser, I wouldn't have come near you." They walked over to the counter. Darius ordered 2 coffees, his hands shaking as he pulled change out of his pockets and counted it. The girl looked at him with disdain. Tanisha watched the scene without any emotion. There he was, the man who had once laughed at her, called her a gray mouse, and said she wasn't good enough for him. Now he himself had become what he thought she was, a nobody. And the girl next to him looked at him the same way he had looked at Tanisha 6 months ago. Darius picked up the coffees and turned around. Their eyes met again. He took a step toward her, but Tanisha simply looked away and returned to her book. She just kept reading, as if he weren't even there. "Darius, why are you standing there?" the girl called out. "Let's go sit down." He stood for another second, then turned and followed her to a table in the corner. Tanisha saw in her peripheral vision as they sat down, as the girl continued to complain, and as Darius sat hunched over, staring into his cup. Tanisha finished her coffee, ate her croissant, left a generous tip, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the cafe. She didn't look back or approach them. She simply walked past as you would pass a stranger. It was sunny and warm outside, the first day of Indian summer. Tanisha stopped on the sidewalk, lifted her face to the sun, and smiled. Her phone rang in her pocket. It was Aunt Gloria, calling to invite her to the country house. She said the apples were ripe, and they needed to harvest them. "Of course I'll come," Tanisha said. She walked down the street, and for the first time in many years there was no heaviness in her chest, no fear of tomorrow, no shame, no pain. There was just life, new, bright, and full of opportunities, and it belonged only to her. She walked past a travel agency window and stopped. Photographs of Paris, Prague, and Barcelona hung on the display. Tanisha paused. Maybe it was time to go somewhere else, to Paris, for instance. Darius had once said he wanted to go there when he got rich, but he didn't get rich. She did. She smiled at her reflection in the window. No, not Paris. Paris could wait. Right now, she just wanted to live here, in this city, enjoy every day, paint, study, help people through her foundation, and be herself. And what happened with Darius, that was another life, a stranger's life, the past. She had closed that door, and she would never open it again. Never. She took out her phone and called Keisha. "Keisha, let's go out tonight. Maybe to the theater or that new restaurant on the waterfront." I'd love to, her friend chirped happily. You sound especially cheerful today. Just a good mood, Tanisha smiled. She hung up the phone and walked on down the sunny street. And in her heart, it was light and bright, as if she were flying, not walking, as if the whole world had opened up before her, full of color and possibilities. Somewhere in the cafe behind her, Darius sat staring at the bottom of an empty coffee cup, cursing the day he decided that money was more important than love, and pride more valuable than humanity. But that was no longer her concern. That was his life, his choice, and his consequences. And she had her own life, finally her own, and it was beautiful. That evening, Tanisha stood on the balcony of her condo with a glass of wine in her hand. The city lights twinkled below, music played somewhere, people laughed. She looked at the stars and thought of the old man she barely knew, who had given her a second chance at life. "Thank you, Mr. Miller," she whispered into the night. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for the justice. I won't let you down. I will live this life with dignity." The wind caught her words and carried them off into the darkness. Tanisha finished her wine, went back inside, and went to sleep. Calmly, without nightmares, without worries. Just sleeping, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day. And it would be a good one, because every day was good now, because she was free. Finally free. And that was true happiness. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.